Hi and welcome to another Kotlin demo. This time we'll be using SpringBoot to build a REST API using the recently released Spring 5. We'll also be using MySQL so that we'll delve a little deeper into the configurations of SpringBoot rather than the standard configuration that you'll often see in demos which use H2. Hopefully this will be a little bit more informative and a little bit more instructive on how to build SpringBoot applications using Kotlin. So to start our demo, to build our REST API, the first thing we're going to do is go across to start.spring.io. This allows us to build a Maven project using Kotlin and the latest version of SpringBoot. We set up a group ID and an artifact name, and then we need to pull in the dependencies. So as we're going to be building a REST API, the first dependency that we need is web. As we're going to be writing this data from this REST API back and forth to a database, we need the JPA dependency. And then finally we need an underlying database to store it to. So we could use H2, and that's what SpringBoot is configured to work with initially. But I'm going to go a step further and use MySQL so that we need to build in the extra dependencies and the extra configurations to get MySQL working. Which is probably one of the things that you don't see as often in these types of videos. So we'll generate that project, which will download it to our downloads folder. I've already extracted it here. So here's the zip file which I've exploded, and then we've got the POM and the default source, as you can see here. Okay, so let's minimize that. So now we can create a new project from existing sources, and we select the folder name of the extracted zip file. We specify that we want to import this project from external model, which is a Maven model, and then we should be able to leave most of these settings as they are, and then we can finish. Bring that in. Sure, let it show off the screen like that. Okay, so we've got everything that we need now. So you can see it's a standard Maven project setup. We've got the source and the Kotlin folder, and here is the standard SpringBoot application configuration. So that's not what we're going to go with today, however. What we need is we're going to create a new resource. Now this could quite happily be within this main class here, but we're going to assume that you're going to build this out to be a bigger application, so we'll start these things as we mean to go on. So we'll create a resource class for the to-do object that we want to work with. So first of all, we will create an entity. So this is the entity that we're going to be using back and forth to our database. So it's a Java persistence entity. This is going to be based on a class. So it's a to-do class, which is going to have an ID of type long. It's going to have some text of type string. It's going to have a done flag, and finally it's going to have a created at, which is going to be an instance, which is from Java type. Okay, now straight off this isn't going to work with SpringBoot or with JPA, because JPA needs a default constructor. And if you understand how Kotlin works, this actually creates a constructor from here. So how to create a default constructor in Kotlin? By setting default values. Now, the alternate method here is to use a Maven plugin called noargs, JPA noargs, I believe. But for what we need, this actually works quite well. There you go. So let me reduce the size of this a little bit. Okay, so we'll set our ID to 0, string the text to be empty string, the done boolean to be false, and the created at time to be the current timestamp. That still doesn't work entirely as we want, because this ID we want to be auto-generated. So let's specify that we want that to be an ID, and then we'll specify how that generated value works, and then we'll specify the strategy. Generated type also. Great. Okay, so now we have our entity. Fantastic. So we've now got an entity that we can write back and forth to the database. So next we need to create an interface for our JPA repository. Now in Kotlin this is extremely easy, so we'll create a new to-do repository, which extends a JPA repository of type to-do with the key field being long. And that's it. We now have a JPA repository that we can pass into our class. Okay, now the actual bulk of the work, creating the class that does our REST API. So we want to create the to-do resource. Okay, we'll come back to that bit in a second. So we'll specify this as a REST controller, and we'll set up a request mapping for this, and that request mapping has a value equal to, so that means accesses localhost / whatever port. In this instance it'll be running on port 8080 / to-do, gives us access to all the methods now that's going to be inside of this class. What we also want to do as well is to enable web MVC. Now we'll need that later, so it'll help give us access when updating and passing into the request body into the update method. Okay, so we'll just tidy up these imports a little, and that should be about fine. Okay, so first of all we want to create a get mapping. Now this is going to be to get all of the to-dos that we have available to us. So the get mapping will just be /to-do/, quite straightforward. And we're going to do that with a function called getAll. Could call the function whatever we like really, but I think this is the best descriptive name we can do. And now we need to load this from the JPA repository, but we don't have access to it at the moment because it's just an interface. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to pass in the to-do repo of type to-do repository, and that's it. That will SpringBoot will generate the to-do repo for us based on that interface, using the to-do and the long objects for its definition, and it'll give us all of the CRUD create, read, update, delete methods that we need. And so the first one that we need is to get all. So to-do repo.find all. And it's simple as that. So as you can see, we're using a Kotlin inline function when we don't need to have braces. It's possible to rewrite this method as this, which will be a list of to-dos, which is reasonably readable, but if I can help it, I tend to try to get these things using the much more expressive Kotlin syntax. So that will allow us to write back and forth to the database, with one simple exception. The database is not configured yet, because if it was H2 it would just be working, but for us we need to update our application properties. So over here in this window you can see that I've created a database already called Kotlin Web Demo, that's running on my local host, so I need to create a Spring data source URL, which is to MySQL, running localhost on the standard port called Kotlin Web Demo. I've also created a user inside of MariaDB or MySQL for username and password. So not highly secure, but for demo purposes this works well. Then finally we need to specify how Hibernate manages the DDL for auto updating. Now I'm going to set this to none because I'm going to create the database myself. So nope, sorry, wrong one. Okay. So I am going to drop the table to do. It's already there, that's just fine. And now I'm going to create a new to do. I'll paste this in to save us a little bit of time. So simply it has an ID, the text, the created at timestamp, and the done boolean. There we go, and we now have our database set up. Okay, so if we started our application, this should now work. It won't do a great deal at the moment because there's nothing running for it to work with. So let's go back and carry on creating our other mappings. So the next mapping that we're going to create is to get a single entity, so a single to-do object, and this one is just going to pass in the ID. So we'll call it get1, and this time we've got a path variable that we need to get access to, and the path variable is the ID long. And again we'll use the Kotlin expressive function definition, and we'll use the to-do repo.findById, and then we'll pass in ID that was passed in as part of the path variable. Again, very nice and clean, nice and easy to understand. Still not able to do a great deal unless we actually start inputting some data. So let's create a post which allows us to create new. So we'll create function new. Now you might think that this looks a bit odd that I can create a function called new, but in Kotlin new is not a keyword, so we'll use it. And we wanted the data from the request body this time. The value for where we're going to pass it to is just the same as the get all, so it's calling to do, but it's a post this time, so it will create a new to do within the to do mapping. Now the request body, I'm going to set this up to just simply pass in some text of type string, and then within the to do repo we need to call save. But we need to pass in a to-do for it to save, so we'll create a new to-do, and as I said, Kotlin doesn't have the new keyword, so just calling the constructor is fine. And because we've got default values in all of these things, I don't need to pass in all of the arguments. So the only one that I have access to is the text value, so I will specify the text property and pass in text that has been passed into me. Now that will create a new to-do with all the other values defaulted. The default value ID of 0 will get overwritten by Hibernate when it writes it down to the database, and then it will specify the rest. So next we're going to move on to, we want to be able to delete these entities as well, so we'll create a delete mapping. Now we don't want to delete all of them, so we will specify which to do we want to map. So we'll use the similar path that we use for the get mapping. So here we know specifically which function we want to delete. We'll create a new function called delete. Again, we'll access the path variable, passing in the ID, and then the to-do repo, just call delete by ID and pass in the ID. Again, as simple as that. Now finally we want to be able to update the to-dos, so that might be the text, or it might be the fact that the to-do has been done, so we're updating the boolean. So to do that we're going to use a put mapping, and again we will specify the ID of to-do that we're going to update, and then we'll create a new function called update. Pass in the path variable as we have done before with ID of type long, and then also we need to access the request body. However, unlike the request body previously that we did up here, which took in of type string, we're actually going to pass this in as type to do. So this is going to be some JSON that we're going to pass in. Now I can't do all this on a single line, so I'm going to specify the return type, which is the updated to-do that we've created, and then we will work through. So we'll create, we'll load the to-do from the database. So the to-do that we wish to update, we'll say to-do repo dot find by ID and pass in the ID. However, there's a chance that that may not be, that the ID is incorrect. So to ensure that we're working correctly with null safety, we'll throw a server error if that to do is not found. Again, now because we've done that, we can guarantee that the to-do is non-null, I should say, so we don't need to use optional. So what we shall do is from the to-do to update, we will update the text from this, from the to-do that was passed in, and then we will update the boolean for done, again with the value that was passed in. And then finally we're going to save that back to the repo. So from to-do repo dot save, and we'll pass in the to-do update. Now, and as part of the save method, it will return back the updated to-do that's been written to the database. Hence, the return type is of to-do. And that should be everything that we need for our system to work. So we'll save that and go to our demo, and we'll run this program. Hopefully all works well. So let the system compile it just for a second. Okay, so we're up and running. So first of all, let's just check that the database is empty. We can do that here and select start from to do. And as you see, we've got an empty set. And I can confirm that by also going to localhost port 8080 /to-do. So that will be calling this getAll here. There we go. I needed the slash on the end here. Okay, so we don't have anything in the database, which is fine. So what we want to do is we want to post some data to the server. So we'll do a curl request. We'll specify the content type. Now, as it's mentioned before, this is of type text that we're going to be passing into the body, so we'll just specify this. And then this is my first to-do. Close that off. And we want to be sending that to HTTP localhost port 8080 /to-do. again, so this will send it to this post mapping here. And there we go, we got a response back from this, which was the response to the save, with the data with done equals false, the created at with the epoch time here, and we've got an ID of 3. So there you go, select star from to do, we have it's in the database as we expected, which is great. Okay, so now that we've managed to do the put, we can go back and do the get all. And here we go, we've got an array, and there's only one item in the array, which is as we would expect. So how about we again? So we've tested this function, and we've tested this function. Now let's test this function here. So we want to specify a specific to do. So if I go to number 1, we'll get nothing back as expected. But if I go to number 3, there we go, we've got the same one, except it's not in an array because it's a single object as we want. So great, all 3 methods tested. Okay, now let's see if we can update our data. So we want to have a put request, and we want a couple of headers on it this time. So we want to have an accept header of application JSON, and we want a content type header. Content type, again, application/JSON. And this time we are going to pass in a JSON, some JSON data. So we want an ID, and the ID is number 3. We want to specify the text, and we will say the text is, let's just call it updated. Let's make it nice and quick. And then we want to specify done is equal to true. Okay, and then we want to send that to, again, localhost port 8080 /to-do/ again, we want to update number 3. There we go, there's a problem in my... Great, so that returned the text is updated, done is true, the created at is still the same, the ID is still the same. So if I go to the database, there we can see it's been updated as we expected to. So the created at stayed the same, the done has changed from 0 to 1, so it's a truth. The ID stays the same, and the text has been updated. Fantastic, so all we have left now, so we've managed to test this update. We want to test the delete function. So this one, quite straightforward. We want to do a curl of type delete, and we just specify the path we want to delete. So in this case we want to delete number 3. And there we go, that's run successfully, and we can see our database is back to empty. And that's it, very simple demo, very small amount of code to run. We ran the whole thing over less than 40 lines of code with a full CRUD using a to-do data transfer object using the database. The database being a simple Spring data source, and then the standard boot demo application. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Any questions, please file them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video and want more, please subscribe. Thank you very much.